talk this evening is to be given by Rafał Borowski. And I asked Rafał for a brief outline of who he is and what he does and where he's at. And I found out that he's an anti-capitalist, he's an anti-racist, he's a vegan, he's a pacifist, he's an environmentalist. He's also an immigrant who came to the UK 10 years ago from northeast Poland. He joined the Labour Party before the 2019 election, and the first time I met him is when he actually came onto the stall in Chester, by the Chester City Centre, and he helped out on the stall. He also had this wonderful, huge placard, because that was the day when we were talking about Extinction Rebellion, and there was a talk from Chris Matheson on the steps of the church by the cross, and you had Rafał there with this huge, huge placard, which I'll never forget. I took a couple of photographs of it. And then unfortunately, we've had the lockdown since, although I did meet him a couple of times. And just before Christmas, he said, can I do a talk? And I very, very welcome. Anyone can do a talk on this. It's absolutely brilliant. Then I found out that there's only one thing I don't like about Rafał. All right, but that really can't be helped. He's a Liverpool fan, but we won't talk about that. So Rafał, over to you. We've got this wonderful talk coming up now. What Rosa Luxemburg could teach us in 2021. And if you could start the recording, have you done it already? Brilliant. I'm going to hand straight over to Rafał. It's great to see you here, mate, and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rafał Borowski, and I will give you some short few lessons that we can learn from Rosa in 2021. I'm not sure, Anne, if I can share a slide by any chance. Oh, I'm not here.
Anne, you're muted. Can you show a slide for Rafał?
Okay, no worries, no worries.
No, you can now.
Okay, perfect. It's.
I was just doing it.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Okay, great. Okay, so a very quick disclaimer. I'm not a historian, therefore I can't guarantee factual accuracy of every information about the interesting life of Rosa Luxemburg. However, this presentation will be based far left agenda. Therefore, the warning message for those with a centrist or social democratic views and a poor heart condition. These are my own views, and I don't want to argue. Just to provide you some food for thought, and give you some opportunity to go back and understand Rosa and her view of the world yourself. So back to Rosa Luxemburg. All accounts of her, both praising and damning, agree on one thing: the fact that she lived truly extraordinary life, especially for a woman of her time. She was Polish, Jewish, she was an immigrant, she was a political refugee, she was disabled, she was socialist, and she never shied away from speaking her mind, especially to people who were considered her socialist superiors. Why Rosa? From my private perspective, it was my kind of private history lesson, well overdue, however so much insightful. The more I was reading and learning about her views, the more I was agreeing with her perception of capitalist system. That being decided, yes, should present to you tonight. And believe me, it was a great, not a great timing to be fascinated about another woman during Valentine's Day. I keep hearing from my wife late evening yesterday, are you done with her? Are you done with her? And to be open and honest, I'm not done with her yet. It's so inspiring and so interesting that I'll be keep going back and learning more and more about Rosa in the coming years, definitely. So, so I would like you to I would like to go back. I would like you to take out from the presentation to give you some kind of inspire you or give you some interesting thoughts from Rosa and her ideas, and she had plenty of those. And so you can go back yourself after this presentation and learn your own, learn yourself about Rosa and her ideas, whether this is a socialist, capitalism, nationalism, party politics. She wrote a lot and very interesting. Okay, so let's start with early years of Rosa's life. It will be in less than 3 weeks. We'll celebrate 150 years since the birth of Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa was born on March 5th, 1871 in Zamość, a city in a Russian-occupied Poland. She was the youngest of 5 children of a lower middle-class Jewish family. When she was 2 years old, the family moved to the capital city, Warsaw. In the mid-1880s, Luxemburg signed up to the Polish left-wing Proletariat Party. At the age of 15 only, she began political activities by organizing the general strike. As a result, 4 of the Proletariat Party leaders were put to death and the party was disbanded, though the remaining members, including, of course, Rosa, kept meeting in secret. She continued studying to pass her A-levels, at the same time being active in political underground. Later, when she became known to the Tsarist police and her safety was at risk, like many of her comrades from the Russian Empire who were faced with prison, she emigrated to Zurich in late 1880s, age 18. And here we had the first lesson from Rosa, at least from my perspective. It's about starting the political activity early in your life. So the passion and the end goal are not compromised by the capitalism reality. And I think to all of us, who are active in the Labor Party and the socialist left-wing movement, encouraging participation of young activists in those movements. Last elections of 2017-18 showed that the younger generation are not participating in election at the same rate as older ones, of course. But why and how we can make them active? Because when you look then into the detail, into the data, the positive side of those younger generations that there are significantly more young people expressing left-wing views than it was in 70s or 80s. So that why it's widened our chance of, for example, putting Labour government in the power if we focus on the younger generations more. Right. So I don't have, of course, any recipes, but this is kind of questions and lessons that we can learn from that. And another thing here is education, education, and education. Rosa herself took part in organizing something similar to what we have right now, those meetings, and she was running those, learning and tutoring others about the socialist and socialist movements. According to Rosa, education was a universal entitlement. Which she wrote in 1907, in the socialist society, knowledge will be the common property of everyone. All working people will have knowledge. In the latter, she wrote, freedom is always an exclusively for the one who thinks differently. For Rosa, thinking differently, thinking against the grain of received opinion, Rosa, in both her life and work, reminds us the importance of critical consciousness. Only by understanding. I hope you can still hear me. I hope so.
You're breaking up occasionally, Rafa. You're breaking up a little bit.
I do apologize. If you lost me, I will try to get back very quickly. Okay, so moving back to second lesson. After becoming one of the few women to gain a doctorate from the University of Zurich in Switzerland, she moved to Germany in 1897 to join the Social Democrats, Europe's most powerful left-wing party. And here comes her publication. Luxemburg.
Could I stop you there, Rafa? Because unfortunately we can't hear you at the moment. Might be an idea if I asked everyone to turn their cameras off, and put themselves on mute, and it might just help the band wave or something like that. And everyone seems to have done that. Okay. Brilliant. I'll let you have a go, Rafa. Cheers, mate.
Okay, if it will be still problems, I'll just switch to the 4G. Maybe it will help. Okay, just let me know.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So what I was about reform and revolution. So one of her first major writings, 1898. So at that time, Rosa was a leading critic of more conservative, right wing of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, SPD, led by Eduard Bernstein. In a Reform or Revolution book, Rosa insisted that socialists cannot counterpose reform and revolution, but that rather there is an unbreakable tie between the two, the struggle for reforms being an essential means to the end of revolutionary transformation. Rosa argued, people who pronounce themselves in favor of the method of reform through the legislation in place in contradiction to the conquest of political power and social revolution do not really choose a more tranquil, calmer, and slower road to the same goal, but a different goal. Instead of taking a stand for establishment for a new society, that they take a stand for surface modification of the old society. Further, she wrote, our program becomes not the realization of socialism, but the reform of capitalism. Not the suppression of the system of wage labor, but the decrease of exploitation. That is, the suppression of the abuse of capitalism instead of suppression of capitalism itself. The reformist strategy thus throws us the possibility of revolution. It is also less able to actually win reforms. And when the social democracy comes to power in government, it will only be able to manage the system, not change it. The record of social democracy in office throughout the 20th century was repeatedly confirmed. Rosa's analysis from Germany's SPD in the Second World War and both World Wars, though to Britain's New Labour at this century's end. So second lesson is, from my perspective, is about the need for pluralism on the left. We need to work together to get the Labour government to make necessary reforms and prepare a ground for revolution. Neither reforms or revolution is done by individual. Therefore, for those considering, for example, leaving the Labour Party, please reconsider staying. And if you really need to leave, please join the other movement, because only in the groups and in the movements we can make a change. So moving to the third lesson. First World War broke out in 1914. The International collapsed as the Social Democratic parties of Western Europe, including the German SPD and British Labour Party, backed the war policies of their respective national governments. At the time of the First World War, Rosa disagreed with Lenin and Bolsheviks over their support for the right of nations to self-determination, in particular, the demand for Polish independence from the Russian Empire. Rosa asserted that only right-wing Polish nationalists would benefit from the demand, that in any case political independence was irrelevant, since a small nation such as Poland would remain economically dominated. Instead, she argued the left should sidestep the national question and fight directly for socialism. And here is another third lesson. It's a critique of nationalism and imperialist war. She was, of course, outspoken pacifist, and because of that, she ended up in the jail on a couple of occasions. She was extremely frustrated when all hard work to unite international working class through the Second International was thrown away, slaughter each other. And one of her arguments against the war was that there was never, in the case of history, that there was a war voted by the people, only by a few people in the power. Moving to the fourth lesson of Rosa Luxemburg. In 1911, when the left was debating how to stop the upcoming war, leading German social democrats started pleading with their ruling classes to form a capitalist United States of Europe. Karl Kautsky wrote that for a lasting duration of peace, which removes the ghost of war forever, there is only one way today: the union of the states of European civilization.
You've gone, Rafa, again.
The European Union is the reason why there has been no Third World War, that the ever closer EU integration is the path to future peace. Luxemburg's response was a book called Peace Utopias. Rosa insisted that the idea of European Union as a peace agreement, while reasonably at first glance, was brainwashing, bearing no relation to economic or political realities. Internally, there exists within Europe, she wrote, among the capitalist states, and will so long as this exists, the most violent struggles of competition and antagonism. And those antagonisms were not only to burst out in the First or Second World War, but there also have been evidence in the peacetime through the many conflicts and positions of an unequal power that occurs within the United European Union. When it came to external relations, Luxemburg pointed out the idea of European Union was also deployed to divide Europe from the rest of the world. She wrote, "Every time that bourgeoisie politicians have championed the idea of Europeanism, the union of European states, it has been an open or concealed point directed against the yellow thread, the dark continent, against the inferior races. You leaders might no longer use such a loaded language, but for example, migrants struggling and dying to enter Fortress Europe would probably get the point about the." And now Rosa concluded on the European Union. If we, socialists, were to try to fill the old skin with a fresh and apparently revolutionary wine, then it must be said that the advantages would not be on our side, but on that of the bourgeoisie. So here, once again, and that was incredible when I was keep reading and reading of Rosa Luxemburg, that she also gave, at least for me, idea that Brexit is not end of the world. She gave very clear explanation about EU being currently neoliberal capitalistic free trade experiment. Let's look at simple rules of EU. The single market seeks to guarantee free movement of goods, capital, services, and labor. There is nothing of course we took advantage of a labor movement, considering this is a free movement of people. But when you look at those three pillars, goods, capital, service, and labor, explained like that, they're nothing to do with freedom or peace. They're talking about, freedom for capitalism to grow. And this, I think, that on the fifth lesson we'll discuss it a bit more. And what's more, you have nothing to do with democracy, as we can see, and we can experience in the situation of Greece in 2015, when democratically elected governments have nothing to say, and the whole EU is run by technocrats. So when it comes to Brexit, it reconcile. I mean, when the Brexit was voted, I was as an immigrant to that country, I wasn't happy. But I think I went through the grieving period, and now I'm seeing this as a huge opportunity also for Labour government, because we cannot think about this that leaving EU it may only means that the working condition of a working class or climate or and the environmental condition will worsen. They'll only worsen if there is a Tory government in place. But imagine if we have Labour government that have much more freedom now being out of EU to drive for a right change to the right direction without having those constraints of European Union, right? So that's another fourth lesson from Rosa. And the fifth one is around capitalism itself. The accumulation of capital was the only work Luxemburg published on economics during her lifetime. In the polemic, she argued that the capitalism needs to constantly expand into non-capitalist areas in order to access a new supply sources, markets for surplus value, and reserves of labor. According to Luxemburg, Marx made an error in the Das Kapital, in that the proletariat could not afford to buy commodities they produce, and by his own criteria, it was impossible for capitalists to make a profit in a closed capitalist system, since the demand for commodities would be too low, and therefore much of the value of commodities would not transform into money. According to Rosa, capitalists sought to realize profits through the offloading surplus commodities onto non-capitalist economies. Hence the phenomenon of imperialism, as a capitalist states looked for to dominate weaker economies. However, this was leading to the destruction of non-capitalist economies, as they were increasingly absorbed into the capitalist system. With the destruction of non-capitalist economies, there would be no more markets to offload surplus commodities onto the capitalism and would break down. So you can imagine writing this in beginning of 20th century. The capitalism was already there, and it's still there, 100 years later. And I think that proves the point that Rosa was making around that the capitalism is still being able to be in place right now, because it's still being able to grow by expanding into those economies. Even it is expanding into to markets in Latin America, Africa, or Southeast Asia. It's happening right now. How long it takes? Hopefully not too long. But she shows us this link between capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, and militarism that are so interrelated. Can you still hear me? Sorry, because I got something.
Yes, we can hear you, Rafa.
Okay. Sorry. So I want just to close with that. I think in that last lesson from Rosa, when talk about the capitalism and why it still exists and this expansion of capitalism, it also proves that capitalism has nothing to do with democracy. If you go through the history of, not that far away, of how democratically elected governments, for example, in Latin America, were overthrown by capitalism and capitalistic systems. And in short, I mean, capitalism doesn't work. It doesn't work for us humans, for other animals, and for other animals, living organisms, and our planet in general. And I think just to lift us up a little bit at the end of that presentation, just to give you what Rosa is giving us as a last option. And her famous saying this: either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism. So whatever we can understand from current reality being barbarism, and our option is socialism. And what socialism means for us, it means it's very broad term. So going back to one of the previous lessons also about pluralism around Labour Party, I think there's a need for all of us to go back and do our homework, what socialism means for us, and to discuss, debate this in the form like here tonight, and with friends and families, because regression into barbarism and the current progressing with the current capitalistic system, it doesn't work, and we can find multiple examples of that. Yeah. So that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Rafa. That was yeah, it was really cool. That was it was great. And one thing I really did like was what would she do today? All right, in 2021, and there are lessons which you clearly brought out there, the 5 points. I was very interested in 3 of them. I always get lost when you talk about economics, though. So has anyone, I know that one person put her hand up almost immediately, and that was Alison. Have you got a question or anything you want to contribute, Alison?
Actually, I was clapping, but I would like to say I really enjoyed that, Rafa. I'm actually an interloper here. I'm a member of the Communist Party, so I wasn't fazed by any of the language. And I loved what you said about working together on the left, because you know we like that in the CP, and we do. One of the criticisms we have of the sectarian left, we get criticised for our broad support, critical support, but broad support for the Labour Party. So, but we do see that the first step is getting a Labour Party into government. So, and just wanted to say, do you think if Rosa had succeeded in bringing about a socialist revolution in Germany, do you think World War II might not have even happened? Would the Nazis have not got anywhere?
Yes, thank you, Alison, for that, and thank you for the question. Yes, I didn't want to say about Rosa's death because I'm not a fan of that history. But yes, to your point, the far right paramilitary organization that was sent out to kill the revolution and to kill Rosa. They were also later on the backbone of Nazis and their military formation. And when we talk about 2021, no, it was just early January when I was thinking about what I'll be doing the lesson. I think this is the lesson that we learned ourselves, looking what was happening and the insurrection capital and the far right there. So yes, in that particular situation, yes, it might stop. But in revolution, I think yes, definitely. I think there is plenty of arguments behind this, that you know, improving the lives of working class across different spectrum will definitely remove certain need to go towards right wing agenda, or kind of those kind of views. If people will be living, you know, comfortable lives across different geographic locations, I think there'll be no need for wars that are not bringing anything, and they are never being decided by the same people that are taking part in those. So I think that is very, very possible.
Does anybody else would like to make any? Yes, I thought there might be a couple. We're going to start off with Kieran first, and then we'll go to Lynn. Kieran, if you want to mute, thank you.
Yeah, it's just this idea that of capitalism dominating weaker markets. You don't have to go from continent to continent or from country to country to do that, because we do it quite happily inside our own country, because we have stronger markets in the south, for instance, where there's higher profits, and then those people bring their higher profits into the north, if you like, and they can buy up houses and stuff because they've made their profits in a place where they've made their profits somewhere where there's higher profits rather than just sort of profits. For instance, if you were making BMWs and selling BMWs, you'd be making higher profits than if you were selling Vauxhalls, And so if there's a crunch point where you had to compete for resources to do that, the guy making the BMWs is going to be able to get all the resources to do it. And so inside a country, you're going to have these differences. And what we rely on inside a country is we rely on our going back into the distances of time. We'd have a king, and the king would be reliant on his all over the country for people to pay taxes and for people to provide troops and for people to provide resources. And he'd look after those people, and the people of the country would expect the king to look after those people. But now this is all being completely split up. So you've got, whereas to the point that the government is very profit centered and very London centered, and it's not putting the resources into the poorer places that it used to. And we're seeing the wealth from the north being drained into the south. And that's just the point about the more dominant markets taking over the poorer ones. Exactly the same thing is happening. It's a sliding scale. You've got the people in the rainforests having their timber being taken by people in the richer markets with higher profits. There has to be a feedback of some sort, and that's what capital marketeers try desperately to do. I mean, that's my point.
That's cool, Kieran. That's fine. Lynn, you got something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, Rafa. I really like the way you structured it with the 5 lessons. I love the logic of that. And there's 2 of the lessons I just want to pick up on. Lesson number 2 about pluralism. I was just going to ask you, do you think that's possible under our first past the post system? Or would we have to reform that to get a pluralist party political system? And my second question is about the lesson 4, your peace utopia. And I wonder, do you think any aspects of the European Union did meet a criteria for that? And I'm thinking especially of the social chapter and all the workers' rights that were part of the EU structure. So I just wondered what you thought about those 2 points. But I loved your talk, Rafa. Thank you very much.
That's cool. Thank you very much, Lynn. You do know that on Friday we've got Clive Lewis at the CLP who will be talking about PR.
I did, yeah. I saw the email. Yeah, thank you.
Come and listen to what Clive's got to say about PR. Rafa, would you like to say anything about anything that Kieran said or what Lynn said?
I mean, to Kieran's point, he raised really good points. I mean, and you could easily put, at least from my point of view, equal sign between capitalism and barbarism. And going back to the last comment that I've made, if what it is right now, it doesn't work, and from different perspective, you look at from different stakeholders that are, let's put it this way, around the world, if it's us or other, it doesn't work at so many levels for so many people and other living creatures. So we need to move to socialism, right? And what this socialism means. So by reading and learning more about Rosa, I was start questioning myself, well, what I understand by socialism, right? So like kind of my wife keep challenging me. So what if something doesn't work? What you'll be thinking instead of this? Of course, I don't have answer for everything, but at least just starting with the basics, whether the owning the means of production by government. So like kind of socialism from the above, or socialism from the below. So the means of production being owned by working class, right? So this is the question that I think and there are for and against type of arguments here. So I think that's something that could be a separate discussion when it comes to that. Going back to Lynn's a couple of questions and comments. Yes, to be honest, after living 10 years in UK, I'm still learning this voting system here, right? And definitely what I'm seeing is, and I have close comparison from Poland. I'm just following just only political situation there. Exactly, PR gives this kind of flexibility for more pluralism. However, it doesn't work that well, meaning that after for last, I believe, 15 or more years, we don't have any leftist party with sustainable opposition. So you once again, you have pros and cons here when it comes to situation like we have here, and that pluralism we can within the Labour Party. I think I'm not that's I'm not a specialist in the Labour Party, but I know there is a executive committee and there are some special motions that are be there, so there could be and we vote for those. There is a leader that may sits on a different spectrum of the left, and we are all on the different spectrum of the left. But I think as long as we are on the left and there's more and more of us, we can just make this we can at least put the Labour government in power, and that would be a first step. It won't be the end, I think, because that will be just a possibility to do few of the reforms, but will not change the system itself. So that will be, pushing the further to the left if you want to make something more. And then, I have heard Alison from CP. It will be interesting to understand their perspective on that second piece, the revolution there. Yeah. And talking about peace utopias and working rights, I mean, I had some thought about this as well, because now there's a discussion about we are out of UK, and myself being a UK employee, I thought I'll not be governed by those European working rights directive, right? But then I thought that in reality, does it make any difference, those directives? If you start looking at the numbers of hours worked across European Union, they're not the same. You have Germans or in the Nordic countries when they work reasonable amount of hours, and then you have some other countries like Poland or Greece when they work significantly more hours. So being in European Union, does it make it working conditions good enough? And yes, of course, there is a risk if you have Tory government, of course, even more pro-capitalist than European Union itself, that we may have that further squeeze on working rights. But then imagine Labour government, and then having with idea 4 days working week, not just kind of 4.5 or some 35 hours, 40 hours, but then imagine with this kind of policy, 4 days working week, and then to reduce amount of unemployment, to reduce amount of overtime that is work across UK workforce. Why not those type of? So that's kind of imagining Labour government and not having those constraints of European Union. What we can do even better. I think that's my hope.
That is so cool. That is so cool. It's good listening to what you've got to say. And there's a lot I agree with it, Rafa. There are quite a few people here. In fact, I've just seen one of the people who I was going to call upon to ask a question and what have you, but I don't want to make a fool of myself, because last time I said yes, Mike. So this time I'm going to say yes, Rachel.
Well, you got me this time, Dave. Sorry.
Shame.
I just wanted to make an observation, mainly around this notion of pluralism, and a comment on Rosa Luxemburg's contribution. She was a shining example of a militant socialist who was deeply involved in struggle, and she paid for that with her life. The thing about Rosa is that she was first and foremost a communist, and she was one of the great things about her was that she was guided by theory. So her revolutionary, militant socialist action was rooted in Marxist theory and in the work of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. So she, for herself, took up a clear ideological position driven by socialist ideas informed by Marxism, which for me is the best way to go about thinking through how to build a movement towards socialism. On the issue of pluralism, I think she was really referring to a pluralism of the left. In other words, that communists like her can work with people who are not communists, like most of the people in this meeting now, in order to do the best that we can under the current conditions, especially given that we're actually not going to overthrow the ruling class tomorrow or next week, probably not next year, but we'll see. In coming to terms with our current difficulties, and in particular, the terrible weakness of the left, the terrible division of the left, I believe that the establishment of a new pluralism of the left is very, very important. That we do find a way of coming together. For most of us here, under the umbrella of the Labour Party, but reaching out to others as well who are not in the Labour Party, in order to try and hammer out some sort of, well, what the hell are we going to do under these current difficulties with Labour's drastic move to the right, and how are we going to rebuild a left that is a force to be reckoned with? I mean, we tend to talk about the big issues of climate change and so on. Well, realistically, what small steps can we take on the way to dealing with these awful issues that are, I'm very worried about the future, so I would like to see some movement towards rebuilding the left as a first step.
That's cool. Thank you very much indeed, Mike, for that. Rafa, do you want to say, comment on what Mike's just said?
I think that's the point that I wanted to make around education, and this building up grass movements. No, within the Labour Party or around, anywhere on the left. Let's put it this way, right? And we saw that it works. That it works in recent example of Bolivia and their situation after election when you have strong grassroots movements on the left, you have those base, you have those fundamentals that you can make a change, and with that, educating yourself, educating others, creating, of course, in current pandemic situation it's not possible, but creating a space for people to meet occasionally, not only just once a week, but I would imagine also creating a place that you can meet every day, and by coincidence. And those are the places like in I was reading the last Tribune in Liverpool, really interesting pub, and the place that was created, I think the Dockers strikes in late 90s, and remained until today as a place of for people on the left to meet, interact on even occasionally on day-to-day basis, basically. So this is another idea, but just kind of definitely not knowing our, let's put it this, not knowing our differences on the left, but and discussing about this, and you know, arguing and this, but when it comes to the situation like, you know, like elections or other situation when we can make a change, it's like, you know, being the left from the right, it's anything good. And to get the first step of getting a left-wing government, let's put it this way, right? Maybe not having calling this Labour, but left-wing government.
Vicky, you've got a question.
Oh,
And
yes.
hello.
Hello, thank you. That was a wonderful talk, Rafa. And, you know, how glad I am that there was such a person called Rosa Luxemburg, and I feel inspired to find out more about her. But what my ears picked up on was this phrase about socialism and barbarism. Because on Saturday, I listened to a conference by Zero COVID, chaired by Diane Abbott. And there were two fantastic speeches talking about ecology and the pandemic, and the realization of actually where we are in terms of our existence on the planet, and the idea that with a temperature rise of temperature's risen 1.2 degrees, 2 degrees, 1.5 and 2 degrees being the target, and it was mapped out what this means for the planet, which is extinction basically, you know, and so we really haven't got a lot of time to debate these things, because I think barbarism is upon us. The barbarism in the discussion, you know, most people, when they boiled it down, came to the conclusion that the reason why we're facing the extinction of the planet is because of capitalism and the need to exploit the planet to the extent that we're going to be extinct. So in order to solve this and pandemics and things like that, which are going to come about due to global warming, we're going to have to achieve socialism. We're going to have a different system because capitalism has outlived its usefulness. And so it just was so daunting. The task in front of us is so daunting, and we haven't got very much time left. So, you know, I'm really annoyed about it on several levels, because I'm not going to have a lovely retirement, indulging myself in the things that are enjoyable things, because there's something in me telling me I've got to speak up, I've got to find out, I've got to urge action, because there's very little time left. So Rosa Luxemburg and people like that who've been before us and shown us a way, we just need to quickly learn those lessons and to encourage others to meet the task, because if we don't, barbarism, extinction is there.
Thank you, Vicky. I saw Sally put a book up saying Red Rosa, and I think that's a good book to look at. She's got it held up there. There's a couple of people. I knew that Nigel James could never be quiet, really, because he's made a comment in chat. So I'm very pleased to see that you're back on, Nigel. And also another shout out for someone we haven't seen for a long time. That's Mandy, which is really nice to see you, Mandy. Not that, just a picture, that's all. We've got about another 5-10 minutes if anybody's got any other questions. And there are a lot of people. Hello, Nigel. It's good to see you, mate. Yes, Panda, you've got something to say. Young David.
Yes. Can you hear me? That's the main thing.
Yes, we can this week.
Good, good.
Everyone's just turned off now, Dave, you know.
Pardon?
Sorry, go on.
Oh, well, it is an extension, I think, of what Vicky's just said, which is really when Rosa Luxemburg was writing about and challenging this issue of markets and so forth with Marx, Clearly time has gone on since then, and we've seen a growth in this more globalized markets and searching for those markets, you know, across the world. And we've seen the barbarism that, you know, accrues from that. And I think, again, harking back to what Vicky just said, that in fact, it's because in pursuit of those markets across the world that we've got extreme poverty. You know, tonight I was looking at something that was on the TV, and it was absolutely appalling. And on top of that, to put it quite bluntly, capitalism has caused the climate change that we're witnessing and we're living through. It is, to me, the extension of the capitalist system. It's pushing the capitalist system really to its ultimate, I think. And again, I agree that looking at it as rational as you can, we do not have an alternative. And I hear people talking about building back better and all this. Now, we've got to have a very, very close look and a serious look at introducing socialist policies, because, as has already been said, the capitalism has reached its zenith. It's flawed the planet completely and will continue to do so. And we definitely need that change. We've got to have it.
Thanks, Dave. Ray's got his hand up. Ray?
I mean, it was very interesting listening, particularly in terms of looking at specific lessons from Rosa's life for us today. I must admit, you know, Rosa is not someone I've delved into in any great detail, but you know, clearly she was around at a time when you know, the movement was struggling to sort of convert the philosophy of Marx, you know, into a question of, you know, how do you actually get to overthrow capitalism? And you know, that was, you know, the big argument in many ways. And you know, there were sort of big setbacks like 1905 in Russia, and so it was a real period of flux, and people were trying to find appropriate ways forward. You know, Trotsky and Lenin were at odds on things, and in many senses, it was only really, you know, Lenin's sort of firm grip of things in terms of you know, his view that the Bolsheviks had power and had to seize power, which actually brought about the revolution. I think, you know, there's a lot of people were sitting around really waiting to see where things were going, and even then, you know, on the day they're seizing power, there were Central Committee members trying to undermine that because they had a different view about whether that was the right thing to do. So, you know, these are huge, complicated questions, because at the point of overthrowing capitalism, you risk everything. You risk being crushed and destroyed. You know, and almost you can think about it in terms of where we are in the Labour Party, in terms of, you know, at least, you know, we have tried to take things forward and to bring about a government which can deliver some left policies, but we've fallen down on the trap around Brexit, unfortunately, which I think has cut across where we were trying to go, even though we were getting quite a lot of echo and movement forward with our policies. So yeah, I think we're almost in a similar situation now. You know, we're still trying to think how would we overthrow capitalism? You know, we've got a lot of criticisms of capitalism. We know how it doesn't work, but actually, you know, replacing that with a new system requires you to convince, you know, at least the broad mass of people that that's a beneficial system, and that it will deliver good things. And certainly, you know, obviously most of us who are Labour Party members feel the argument for reforms and raising awareness about the underlying issues of capitalism, you know, is something to be argued in the Labour Party, and to try and get the arguments across from, you know, some think that, you know, a parliamentary road is not the solution, though it's hard to see what alternative they proffer at the moment. And you know, clearly the other route to seizing power has been talked about around, you know, a general strike. You know, the trade unions bringing things to a crisis where you could bring down, you know, a capitalist government and then, you know, replace it with something which, you know, didn't necessarily mean retaining Parliament or whatever. But you know, so I just think it's interesting that, you know, Rosa was at that sort of very vibrant period around the Russian Revolution. We had the Irish uprising, Russian Revolution in 1917, you know, then failed things in Germany, which then went on, you know, to lead to disaster with fascism coming to power. So it's a, you know, it's a very difficult struggle, and tactics can be a very important issue within that, and we have to learn by talking to each other and learning the lessons from history. And I think, you know, Rosa is one of the people we need to study in terms of the lessons we get from her experience, and add that to all the others that occurred.
Yep, I think you're going to get the book Red Rosa then, Ray. That might help. Rafa, I'm going to ask you just to summarise, to finish off for us, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'll try to do
quick
this.
question, Mike, Dave.
Frank, John, Mark.
That's a quick question.
Of course you can.
Yeah, it was one of the first points I think you made about Rosa, which is that it's getting the youth involved. She's involved as a youth person, and it connects with my point about us having to do something urgently. I don't see the Labour Party doing anything, not even in our own CLP, anything to engage youth. And I think maybe that's something that we could do. So maybe that's something that Rafa could address. Is that a great big gaping hole? Even if you look around at who's attending today, we're not getting the youth, and they're the crucial thing, it seems to me.
That's exactly what I said that in the chat. They're doing this, wrapping themselves in the flag to try and get back to the red wall, thinking that what they like is sort of old school patriotism and things. It's just horrendous. And Nigel said there's so many movements there of youth, but it needs a change in attitude. I don't think a general strike, but a change in attitude to stop consumerism and stop feeding capitalism. Sorry, Rafa.
It's all right, Sally.
No,
Don't worry. Rafa, could you sum up for us, please?
Yes. There's plenty of points raised in the last few questions, but definitely what we get from Rosa Luxemburg, the times she was living, and the way how she was sending her message across, it was a constant struggle. So she was member of this party, you know, that smaller group, you know, she was involved in so many things, and it was a constant struggle with her, whether she was fighting against the right or within her own left party. So I think we should be finding a pleasure in that constant struggle. That if we feel that struggle, maybe it means that we are feeling alive. There is something for us to worth fighting for. So Vicky, to you, I think that maybe not be like calm retirement, but kind of very explosive struggle in the retirement when you'll be very active. I'll call it this way. And to the point of others, you know, when it comes to reform. As I mentioned, the lesson 2 around pluralism and approach from Rosa. I mean, she was talking about reforms and revolution. They are not opposite to each other. They are very linked into. There's a close link between both, meaning that, you know, we can put the left-wing government, let's put it this way, to do the reforms. We cannot forget that, you know, we cannot think about only Britain as a country. We need to think about this internationally. You know, why cannot we do another third or fourth international and have this movement across the world, right? To make the revolution, because the revolution in Britain will not mean a lot, and it will be difficult to do this in one single geographic location. But if you think about this across, it makes completely different. If you take example or inspiration from Indian farmers and the way how they strike, that's a commitment. When I was hearing some of the interviews with them, and they said they will be there for 4 years if it will mean to change any of those environmental laws that are changing in India, or agricultural law, sorry. And I think that's the point of those actions that we can do right now, and those reforms that we can do right now, and then thinking about, well, what is the end goal, and trying to describe it more accurately, you know, treating reforms as a proving the concept to gaining the attention of the youth, for example, or other people, just, you know, that we can deliver on those, you know, on those, and step that's showing the impact and the, you know, whatever socialist policy you can think of, that the proof of the concept that it works, and then, you know, taking this further up to the revolution and changing its system, because, you know, if not, then there is a barbarism left.
Rafa, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you very, very much indeed.